When God's people returned to Jerusalem, they got to work rebuilding God's temple. They finished the temple's foundation, but their enemies did not want them to rebuild the temple. God's people did not want any trouble, so they stopped. God sent the prophets Haggai and Zechariah to encourage the people. So the leaders, Zerubbabel and Jeshua, started working on the temple again.
At this time, a governor named Tattenai saw the rebuilding had started again. Tattenai worked for King Darius, the king of Persia. Tattenai had been put in charge of some of the land, including Judah. Tattenai talked to Zerubbabel and the others working on the temple. "Do you have permission to rebuild this temple?" Tattenai asked. Tattenai sent a report to King Darius. While he waited for an answer, God's people kept building.
This is what Tattenai's letter to King Darius said. To Darius the king, this letter is to tell you that the people in Judah are building the temple of the great God. They said King Cyrus gave them permission to rebuild the temple. Please search the royal records to see if this is true.
King Darius's officials searched the royal records for Cyrus's order. They found it, a scroll with a record from King Cyrus. This is what was written on the scroll. "Let God's temple be rebuilt. It will be a place to offer sacrifices. Let its foundation be rebuilt." King Cyrus had also ordered for the cost of building the temple to be paid for out of the royal treasury.
So King Darius sent a letter back to Tattenai. He gave this order: stay away from the workers in Jerusalem. Don't bother them and don't try to stop them. Give them whatever they need. And if anyone tries to destroy God's temple, may God destroy that person.
Tattenai and the other officials obeyed King Darius' order. The Jewish leaders kept building, and they finally finished the temple of God. The people celebrated and made offerings to God. They chose priests and assistants to serve in the temple. Then God's people celebrated the Passover. They killed the Passover lamb and ate the Passover meal. God's people were so happy because God had changed King Darius' heart so that he wanted to help them. Now the temple of God was finally complete.
God's people rebuilt the temple so they would have a place to worship God. Years later, God sent his son Jesus to be with his people. Now God dwells not in the temple, but directly with his people. Because of Jesus, we don't need a temple anymore.